One of the stories that I was reading this morning is our good friend Bill Barnwell from ESPN, the Insider, has the Niners tied to Henry as well.
Okay.
And that's interesting. I mean, they just picked up Christian McCaffrey a year ago. They haven't really used J.P. Mason. Elijah Mitchell seems to have backslid a little bit. But, I mean, that. What do you think of the idea of the 49ers trying to add Derrick Henry? I'm not a huge fan of this move. If you know, because one, I think you got an aging player. Two, I don't think he necessarily is going to have a lot of success behind this line. He's still a power back for sure. To me, it seems like they've got greater needs in other spots. But what do you think of Derrick Henry coming to the 49ers?
Yeah, I think the needs are greater at other spots. They have to figure out what's going on with this defensive line. I just don't understand why they're unable to generate a pass rush. And let me know if you have thoughts on that, Larry. Maybe we can talk about that at some point. But,
Yeah.
You're investing $92 million into Arik Armstead, Javon Hargrave, who was fantastic last year. He hasn't done anything since that Thursday night football game against the Giants. Nick Bosa has only 2.5 sacks this year. He kind of hinted that he didn't like the scheme because originally with D'Amico, with Robert Saleh, they were a 4-man pass rush front. Now they've been blitzing a little bit more. There is no reason why their sack number should be that low. And you can also make the argument that when you're paying all that money to those players, they should be able to produce at some point. And San Francisco shouldn't have to go out and trade for a Brian Burns. Now, again, Brian Burns, Surtain, those are two players in their mid-20s who I don't look as just rental pieces. They help your Super Bowl chances right now. They help you down the road. I think edge, corner, far more important. Offensive line, but I don't think that you can address that because you never see offensive linemen moved at this point, then running back. I also don't know if Derrick Henry is really a scheme fit for San Francisco with the outside zone. I know that they go north-south, and Christian McCaffrey's done a great job of doing that. He surprised me with the physicality that he brings to this offense. Henry can obviously do that as well. But I think behind this offensive line, I'm not sure how effective Henry would be. Not really a pass catcher out of the backfield, but I'm with you. Like the curious case of Elijah Mitchell, it's unfortunate because if you look at his career so far, with the games that he's missed in the first couple of years he's been in the league, it's pretty much been like one full season. And if you look at those numbers, they're pretty damn good. But this year looks slow, looks indecisive. And that was one of the things that I loved about Elijah Mitchell is that he was decisive. And every time he got the football, it looked as though he turned garbage into gold, right? Where there was nothing to pick up and somehow he was able to churn and find 3-4 yards in a crease. I'd like to play Jordan Mason a little bit more. I think that the flash of McCaffrey and the physicality of Mason is good. But I think that this coaching staff doesn't trust him in pass protection because some of those little things Kyle Shanahan is so stringent on. And if you mess up a couple of times, like you're going to be in the doghouse. So I don't think they need to address running back with a player like Derrick Henry. Look, Rashad Penny's not even playing for the Eagles. And he's been a healthy scratch every game except for one this year. That's a cheap player who you could bring in who kind of gives you that physical approach at that running back position, and he can be had for cheap. Niner fans very familiar with him because when he was actually on the field, which is very few and far between with Seattle, he was a good player. But I'm looking at edge. I'm looking at corner. A dream scenario would be getting a better right tackle and a better right guard. Spencer Burford has like a 24 pass protection Pro Football Focus grade. He's given up 17 pressures this year, and Colton McKivitz is ranked like 57 of 58 right tackles in the game. But there's a reason why offensive linemen are never moved at this juncture of the season, because even bad teams understand that those players are difficult to draft, find, and develop, and they still envision offensive linemen being a part of that rebuilding process.
Yeah, and it's so true. I mean, if you want an offensive lineman, specifically a tackle, you really have to get that guy in the first 25 picks of the first round, or you're kind of screwed. I mean, the idea that you could find a guy later, I mean, it's possible, but it's unlikely, and they're never traded. So you're right. I mean, a lot of Niner fans are like, hey, don't worry about this or that. Get an upgrade for Colton McKivitz. And I've said for weeks now, you better kind of learn to embrace Colton McKivitz because you're not going to do any better.
No.
You're not going to, there's nobody out there in the trade market that you're going to be able to get that's going to be better than Colton McKivitz. So that one's just, cross that one off the list. I've got a list of guys that I think make sense for the 49ers. You mentioned one of them in Kenny Moore. I talked about him last night in the live stream. I think the 49ers need a better slot corner. Nothing against Isaiah Oliver, but he's not even as good as Jimmy Ward was a year ago. They've regressed in the spot. Oliver's got experience in coverage. He can play both outside and inside, but he's not really what you want in either spot, in my opinion. Kenny Moore, I think, would be a great player. And when you said the Eagles might want Kenny Moore, it's like, you know what? This is what bothers me about this battle between the Niners and the Eagles. Every time there's a great player that's potentially out there, Howie Roseman is just absolutely a beeline straight for him. So it wouldn't surprise me if Kenny Moore wound up in Philly, but I think that's the kind of player the Niners need to pursue. The other one that I think is a real live candidate would be Montez Sweat. Now, I thought Montez Sweat was going to be the D end they paid in Washington and that Chase Young would be available. But Young's had a nice little bounce back, even though they didn't pick up his fifth-year option. I'm not sure what his future is there. I thought Montez Sweat for sure would be re-signed, but here we are, and there's a lot of Montez Sweat rumors. The Niners brought him in for a pre-draft visit when he came out of Mississippi State, and Chris Kocurek, their D-line coach, coached him at the Senior Bowl. And there's an affinity, I believe, internally for Montez Sweat. I think Sweat would be an absolute revelation opposite Nick Bosa. But you bring up a great point about the 49ers and their sacks. The Niners have 15 sacks. That's tied for 18th in the NFL. Yep. When they signed Javon Hargrave, the expectation was it was going to be jailbreak on the quarterback. It hasn't been that. Bosa's been colossally disappointing. Drake Jackson had a great week one against the Steelers. He's been invisible ever since. They picked up Randy Gregory. Gregory will help, but I'm not sure exactly what the solution is here. They get pressure, they get hits, but they don't get sacks. And last week, Kirk Cousins roasted them on third down and threw for 400 yards and converted a high clip on third down, and they just couldn't get off the field. What do you think? I mean, the other name, Jeremy Chin, I think makes sense. I think Dante Jackson makes some sense. There's been some rumors tying them to Leonard Williams. I personally wouldn't mind seeing a DJ Jones. To me, a huge concern is the run D. Even though they're listed as third in run D, I think that number's fraudulent because really teams have not run on the 49ers because the Niners have put up 30 points and they've made it a passing game.
Right.
I don't know that I'm really that confident in their ability to stop a good running football team like the Eagles from running the ball. I think we saw it in this last game. I mean, the Vikings averaged 2.1 a carry against the Bears the previous week. They came out with Madison and ran it right at the Niners on Monday Night Football. So, do they need a tackle? Do they need an end? They could use a more dynamic receiver. I look at A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, and I'm looking at the Niner weapons. The Niner weapons run through you. They don't run by you as much, and they could use a dynamic weapon. But, McCole Hardman went to Kansas City. I don't know if Rondale Moore is available. But it's that kind of piece offensively that I think would make them more dynamic.